Greetings. I'm Detective Sergeant First Class Harry Gavel, Camden County Prosecutor's Office Homicide Division, retired. Listener discretion is advised due to the graphic nature of the content. The following episode recounts the details of a real homicide investigation. All information presented is taken from public court records, law enforcement files, and direct investigative experience. The names of the victims and individuals involved are used with the utmost respect, and no part of this story is intended to exploit or sensationalize their sufferings. As a retired homicide investigator, I believe these stories matter. To honor the victims, to understand the truth, and to bring closure to the families left behind. Some content may be disturbing to listeners. Discretion is strongly advised. I call this case, "You're right, I killed my friend." I can remember this case like it was yesterday. Why? Well, grab yourself a cup of coffee, get cozy, and I'll tell you the story. By now it was 1989. I had been transferred into the Camden County Elite Homicide Division of the Prosecutor's Office. At that time, we were still located in the old Parkade building on the 4th floor, located near Broadway and Market Streets in Camden City, New Jersey. In the later years, we were relocated to 5th and Federal Streets, 25 North 5th to be exact. On one side was the Parkade building, where the main officers were, and the crime lab and arson units were housed in downtown City Hall, completely different section of Camden. On the other side of the Parkade building was housed the Homicide Division. Now, at that time, I was considered a rookie in the Homicide Unit. Although I had 17 years of policing and police-related schools under my belt, and the fact that I was born and raised in Camden City, New Jersey, meant very little. I was still green, a rookie, so to speak. A rookie as far as homicide investigations went. Now, yeah, during those 17 prior years, I had been involved in homicide cases from time to time, a few of them. But they all get turned over to the prosecutor's office when the local police investigate a homicide, and there are to be follow-up investigations conducted by the homicide detectives in whichever jurisdiction that the case is respectively connected to. Now, I haven't even yet been assigned or designated as a lead detective in a murder case. That role is what I was now in training for. On day one in the homicide unit, you were basically buried with a box of solved and unsolved murder cases, mainly to study and review to become familiar with the homicide paperwork involved in any murder or sudden death investigation. The various labeled sections of the files that you are reviewing obtain certain forms that must be mailed in to certain agencies, such as, for example, the National Weather Bureau. When you're seeking the weather for the date and time in question of your sudden death, you need that weather report for that day, and it needs to be an official, certified report from the weather department. It'll depict the day and time exactly of that murder case on that particular day. You also get familiar with rap sheets, how to apply for them, victims' photographs, suspect photographs, witnesses, crime scene photographs, etc. All types of different cases will be there, piled up in a box alongside your desk. You go through them to occupy your downtime when you're not out on a job with another seasoned homicide detective who is training you. You're sifting through the box of files that were dumped on your lap. You need to learn this job, and you need to know how to do the job, what paperwork is required. Now, the Camden County Prosecutor's Homicide Unit was staffed mainly and completely by detectives who first served as Camden police detectives. The belief back then was that if the detective worked in the city, they got the most experience compared to a suburban officer. Now, I was coming into an elite squad of seasoned homicide guys that were all ex-Camden cops. I was born and raised in the city of Camden. This gave me an edge, and I did have 17 years of policing under my belt, 12 as a local police officer, and another 5 at the homicide Camden County Prosecutor's Office Division, but not in homicide. All eyes were on me. The only person that didn't think that I would fail as a homicide detective was me. Now, the first thing that happens to the rookie in homicide was that you go on homicide calls with whoever the first out homicide detectives are. You learn, you train, and you are available for any shit detail jobs that arises. You will be an errand boy. You'll take the cars to motor vehicle. If one of the cars need to be renewed, you are as low as what they say, dog shit on the totem pole. But you learn from everything you do. You take the knowledge and you apply it when the time arises. You are learning the ropes, so to speak. Now, that period will last for anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks, maybe more, but not much more. Depends on how many different types of jobs came in that you got the experience to go out on firsthand with the assigned detectives. It depends on your experience, and it depends on the job evaluation that you get from your homicide peers after that time in training. Oh, don't worry. They'll let you know when you're ready to jump in. But they'll also let you and your superiors know when you're not. If you're not cut out for this work, the guys in homicide are not shy. They're going to let it be known. Now, let's go back to like the first days on the job as a rookie homicide detective. I happened to be studying one of the death investigations under my review, which had been ruled by the medical examiner's office as undetermined. The case was highly believed to be an accidental death. Now, as I reviewed this case, I was not liking what I saw or read in the file. But I was very careful not to jump to any conclusions. The medical examiner had already ruled and basically signed off on this case as an undetermined with head trauma as a means of death. The accidental death or undetermined death, and for a rookie to bring the case to the attention of the superiors, claiming that he thought it might be a murder, hello, you screwed that up. If you were wrong, you'd probably be shipped out with Tuesday's trash with a yellow sticky note stapled to your forehead that read, "Reject." Now, I had balls, but I knew better how to keep them balls. They better be smart balls, or you can lose them quick and in a hurry. The victim was a retired elder black gentleman who was living alone in a one-room rooming house in South Jersey. It was actually at 422 Stevens Street in Camden. In the crime scene photos, the victim was seen lying partially supine on the floor of his first floor flat, in close proximity of an old-fashioned cast iron heat radiator. A bloodied open wound was present on his forehead. The closer I looked at the photos under my trusty magnifying glass, the more thoroughly I read the initial reports of the on-call crime scene lab techs and the initial investigators who were on scene. The more convinced I became that what I was looking at and reading about had room for doubt. This case, I thought, was no accident. As the case notes and police reports in the file named an individual by the name of Alan Burrell, black male, age 46. Alan Burrell was a witness who had phoned the police advising that he had found the decedent on the floor in his one-room flat. He claimed that he had walked by the doorway, which was left partially open, and he saw the man lying on the floor, but he did not go in. Further interviews and investigation did reveal that Alan Burrell was a friend of the decedent, identified as Donald Phillips, black male, age 37. Now, I felt that this story needed work as I was reading the synopsis of what was told to the initial investigators on the scene. So I decided to surprise Mr. Burrell at the small flat in which he lived, which was very close to the address and a room where the sudden death had occurred. As a matter of fact, it was in the same rooming house in the 400 block of Stevens Street in Camden, New Jersey. The place of death was a brownstone rooming house in the South Jersey Camden area. It was very old and partially dilapidated, multi-one-room apartment house with an alley next to it with a beat-up wooden gate, complete with various trash cans in various states of neglect and damage. The rooms most likely were being illegally rented out to low-income welfare recipients and people getting various monetary benefits through pension programs, Social Security, welfare recipients, and the like. Now, Mr. Phillips was receiving a monthly Social Security check, which he used to support his very frugal lifestyle. He used it for things like rent, food, and liquor. He also paid his electric bill and water bill, which was not included in his weekly rent for his one-room flat. So I arrived at the location early that morning, and I picked up Mr. Burrell, and I drove him to the homicide unit. He agreed to come in with me. I explained that I was taking a look at the case. I was new to the office, and I saw that he had been a friend of Mr. Phillips, and he was the one that reported the crime, and I had a few questions I wanted to ask of him, only I didn't tell him that I thought it was a crime. What I actually said was, the death of your friend. So, at the homicide unit, I spent a few hours going over the story with Mr. Burrell, which he originally told to the responding police and our detectives. The story was, he knew the deceased and used to visit with him at the deceased's room, usually on or around the first of the month, when Mr. Phillips would receive and cash his Social Security check. With that, they would go to the liquor store and purchase a bottle of cheap rot gut whiskey, and they would return to Mr. Phillips's room and sit together, drinking their liquor of choice and playing on a guitar and singing together and messing around there over the guitar and music and the booze. It'd be a day of drinking and playing a guitar, basically. Curiously, Mr. Burrell did not go into any kind of detail when the police responded to his call to report the death initially. Now, I found that to be a little concerning, and I used that as my theme. My thoughts were that if Mr. Phillips was your friend, you would think that the guy would try to be a little bit more forthcoming, finding him dead on the floor of his apartment with a head wound. So I pressed Mr. Burrell. I pressed him enough to admit that he did not stick around after he made the discovery of Mr. Phillips lying on the floor as he passed by the partially open door of the decedent. That's another thing that bothered me. You see your buddy there dead on the floor, and you don't go in. You don't step in there and holler, "Hey, anybody here?" or something. A little bit more involvement. But then again, on the other hand, I'm also thinking, well, he could be scared of a dead man laying on the floor. He could have felt, oh man, I don't want to, what's this? Thinking somebody could have been in the apartment or the room, and his job was just to call the police. So the fact that he didn't go in the room, so he says, was not a be-all end-all in the case. He said he gave the police his initial verbal information, basically told them he lived in the area and was passing by Mr. Phillips's room. The door was open as he passed. He saw that Mr. Phillips was on the floor by the radiator. He said he looked dead, so he called the police. Burrell did not tell the police of the extent of the friendship initially. It's another thing that bothered me. Why not? Why are you being evasive? Mr. Burrell claimed that he did not enter the Phillips room on this day. I extracted as much information as I could and told Mr. Burrell that in order to make sure that he was telling the truth, that I would like him to return to take a polygraph examination. In order to clear him, since he was obviously the last person to see his friend alive. I wanted to put that question on the table to him. A, I wanted to see his reaction to it. B, his readiness to submit to it, or his reluctance to submit to it. A little bit of that observation could be the beginning of a telltale sign that would cause a red flag to go up. When I asked him if he'd take a polygraph test, he agreed. We were getting chummy now. We were talking on a very friendly level. So, when I say he agreed, I could tell he reluctantly agreed, but he did agree. I told him that I would go downstairs and set it up for tomorrow by speaking with the polygraph operator. At that time, it was Detective Ed Bandock. He was the office polygrapher. I returned and told Burrell that he would be at his room at 8 a.m. and that I would bring him in for the test after that. I also told him that I would certainly transport him back home after the test was completed. So it was all set. As I was leaving the interview room to go and ask Detective Bandock to set polygraph up, I went to grab the keys for the car that I'd be using, but before I could get out the door, Burrell asked me for a cigarette. At that time, I smoked Marlboro cigarettes, and I had the pack of Marlboro cigarettes in my top front pocket shirt. I reached into the top shirt pocket to get a Marlboro as Burrell reached out for me to hand him the cigarette. I observed a huge red flag. It was like a red flag being waved in front of a bull inside of a bull ring. Mr. Burrell's hand and arm was shaking as if he was going to the electric chair. I pulled the cigarette back immediately. I re-entered the room. I pulled my chair up, getting closer to Mr. Burrell. I purposefully was remaining silent as I was adjusting my chair and moving in closer to him. I wanted to see his body movements. Oh, he was definitely squirming. His head was looking down. I could tell he was very, very nervous, and I began my interrogation. I asked him if he was a religious man. He said that he was. I told him that the truth would set him free. I told him that if he had anything on his conscience, now was the time to get it off of his conscience. If he did anything that he felt guilty or responsible for, now was the time to ask his God for forgiveness. Shortly thereafter, a few more words were exchanged. Mr. Burrell took a seat on the floor with his knees up in the air, his head in his hands, and his head bent forward toward his knees. I took a seat on the floor next to him. I put my arm around him. I prayed on the fact that Mr. Phillips was his friend. I had known that he spent a quite amount of considerable time with Mr. Phillips, drinking and playing the guitars, having fun together, living together, basically. They lived in the same rooming house. They were not only friends, they were neighbors. We talked. We prayed together. Mr. Burrell was asked if I could see his driver's license. Mr. Burrell claims that he did have one, but he did not know where it was, and he could not produce it. What he did not know, but was about to find out, was that I knew exactly where it was. It was in the crime scene. During my examination of the photographs in the case, before I decided to interview Mr. Burrell, I noticed a driver's license on top of the bureau in the room itself. I had gone to the evidence room and retrieved the box of evidence. It was taken during the investigation. And in that box of evidence contained the driver's license of Mr. Burrell. He had dropped it in the room when he and Mr. Phillips were engaged in some sort of an argument. After he left the room is when he realized that he didn't have his driver's license, and he must have lost it during the scuffle with Mr. Phillips. He said that they engaged in a fight. Mr. Burrell struck him. He went down and ended up dead on the floor. He wouldn't admit initially that he knew exactly where his license was, but during the interrogation, he did admit it, that he knew he had dropped it there, and that's why he went back. He returned to see if he could see the license on the floor. He knew that the door was left unlocked but closed by him on the day of the altercation. So he opened the door, looked in, knowing full well that Mr. Phillips was lying there dead on the floor, but he wanted to see if he could observe his driver's license anywhere in the crime scene, which it wasn't. The crime lab techs had removed it and placed it into evidence. It's a good thing for me that they didn't return that license to him, which would have been normal protocol. I was surprised that the license was still available. All that was left was him to break. Finally, as we were there on the floor, sitting side by side, he looked up at me very slowly and said, "You're right. I killed my friend." And I patted him on the back, and I said, "Listen, you made a mistake. Things happen, but it's better for you to get it out than to try to live with it and deny it. Are you ready to tell me what happened now?" And of course, he was crying. He was upset, and we got him some tissues. He admitted that he had a drunken tussle over an argument with Mr. Phillips on the day and date and time, November the 13th, 1988. Burrell stated that Mr. Phillips was knocked down, had hit his head on the cast iron radiator, which was piped to the floor, and died. We continued to discuss the circumstances surrounding the argument and the ultimate death. Mr. Burrell stated that he did walk back by the apartment in hopes that he would be able to spot his driver's license on the floor, as he had realized that he had lost it, but he didn't see it on the floor, and he didn't want to go in, so he decided to just call the police and report that his friend was dead on the floor, to his knowledge. After a short break, proper protocols were completed. I obtained a full tape recorded statement of the confession of Mr. Burrell. It was time to get a warrant. Time to hang some paper, so they say in the business. Mr. Burrell was transported to the Camden County Jail to await further processing. He was found guilty and sentenced to a long prison stretch. Assistant Prosecutor Mike Chukanes handled the prosecution. Mr. Burrell was a career criminal. He had been in the courts for various criminal charges since 1970. He was sentenced by Judge Thompson. Assistant Prosecutor Michael Chukanes was asking for a 30-year prison term, must serve 25 years before parole eligibility. However, Judge Thompson sentenced him to 25 years in prison, but must do 10 years before parole. An additional 7 years were also tacked on, but to run concurrent to the 25-year prison sentence before he could be released. Now, it was clear in the confession of Mr. Burrell that he was fully responsible for the death of Mr. Phillips. He initially tried to make some sort of a claim that Mr. Phillips swung at him but missed, and he swung back and knocked him down, which caused him to hit his head on the radiator, and that's what eventually killed him. But in further going over the facts of the case, he fully admitted that it was his fault. He definitely felt responsible. He struck Mr. Phillips, knocking him to the floor, which caused his injury, which ultimately caused his death. Those factors had to be solidly demonstrated in his confession as to why this death had occurred. There was no mistake. Not only was Mr. Burrell a career criminal, but he had been through the jail system before. He tried to remove himself and distance himself from the victim and the scene initially, but he had a heavy burden of guilt that he was carrying around with him every day because they were good friends, and he knew that he was responsible for the untimely demise of Mr. Phillips. Now, from what I could recall, there was a sister of the victim, Donald Phillips. Her name was Annie Shelton. She lived in Maple Shade, New Jersey. She had issued a letter April the 30th of 1990 indicating that the family was very pleased that the death investigation of their brother was successfully solved and brought before the courts, and the person responsible was to be adjudicated for that particular incident. It should be noted that Mr. Burrell was completely remorseful in this case, and that he regretted ever having the situation unfold such as it did. He did say that Mr. Phillips was in fact his friend, and he feared the fact that he was going to get caught anyway, since he had dropped his driver's license inside the crime scene. Now, I know we've all heard about sometimes the perpetrators of a crime return to the crime scene. Well, this is a classic case of that. If he had not returned to the crime scene to look for his lost driver's license, and he had not called the police, nonetheless, he would have ended up being contacted because of the fact that his driver's license was found in the scene, and he knew that. He believed wholeheartedly that he'd be hearing from the police. So he decided to find the body and make up his alibi story in hopes that he would get away with it. He did for a short time, but his conscience would not allow him to completely get away with it. This is Detective Sergeant First Class Harry Gavel. See you next time for another case from the murder capital of the nation.